take you through before we move through to hearing from our experts. So, Proceed by Isla. If you don't know anything about Isla, we are a sustainability non-profit organisation that was founded in September 2020 as the event industry's response to the climate crisis. We are an action-focused organisation and network. We launched with 12 founding member agencies in September and have grown now to over 70 members in 10 months, which has been fantastic to see the appetite for sustainability and that really the narrative around building back better is true and is what people want to see. So Proceed is a resource that we've been working on for a little while. It's our principal resource that we have been able to deliver through the support of our members. So what is Proceed? Proceed stands for Planning and Reviewing the Outcomes for Sustainable Event Deliveries. So Proceed. In the simplest terms, it's a framework that helps event businesses and event owners understand the environmental sustainability performance of their operations and also of their event deliveries. It helps you understand this by benchmarking against best practice. So from an operations perspective, we can have a huge impact here because as businesses, we control our operational processes, who we hire, where we work, what kind of business we conduct. Proceed helps us ensure that our house is in order, essentially. And it also ensures that if our house is on order, it impacts how we do business and therefore how we deliver our events, the work that we do. And events are the biggest area of impact for event service businesses. So we need to make sure that we're making progress in our operations and by having good processes in place to plan and deliver sustainable events and be accountable for that. So Proceed is a system, it's a framework that looks at the 4 core areas of an event delivery and of some of our operational practices. So it looks at energy, food and water, travel and transport, and production. And across these 4 areas, we look at 16 subcategories related to that. So each of those 4 core areas has 4 subcategories. So the idea behind this is that each of these elements is generally active on every event or it's part of critical business activity. So for example, looking down the energy track, looking at that energy pillar, venue energy, what are our venues doing? Our organizational energy, so that might be our warehouse or our facilities or our catering facilities or our offices. The event energy, what we're actually bringing on site, whether it's lighting or audio equipment, right through from smoke machines to radio charging banks, making sure that we're as efficient as possible in energy. And then generators, which aren't active on every event, but generators sit outside of our mains power. They're a temporary power source, and so we can look at that. So you can see that across the Proceed framework, we've got our 4 core areas, but within that, we've got 4 subcategories each. So this is the event framework. This is the Proceed framework. So a little bit about the background of Proceed before I kind of jump into exactly how it works, just to give you a bit of an insight. So we started developing Proceed in May last year. We built a carbon measurement tool in Excel so that we could begin to capture carbon data, but we kept coming back to the problem that judging the environmental impact of an event based purely on its carbon output doesn't actually show how well an event has been planned, whether the most environmentally stringent rules have been in place, or what the actual impact is from the decisions that we're making. And that's because events are so diverse, from weddings to roadshows to exhibitions, product launches, sporting events. The breadth of work that we do in the event industry is just astounding. So comparing the carbon data of a 10-person roundtable event to a 10,000-person exhibition, the roundtable is invariably going to have less carbon. But that doesn't mean that it was a better event. What if all 10 of those roundtable individuals had flown by private jets and were eating beef and were each staying in the penthouse suite of a luxury hotel? And if the 10,000 attendees of that exhibition had walked or cycled to the event location and were having a plant-based lunch and were going home to their own beds at the end of the day? One of those events has been planned with environmental considerations and the other hasn't. So Proceed helps us understand the way that we are planning our events to push us towards net zero and circular events. So great idea. We started this in May last year, having built a carbon measurement tool in a few weeks. We thought it might take a couple of weeks to come up with a universal benchmarking system, but a year later, here we are, having gone through this with a 6-session working group with more than 30 of our members, with review by experts, some of which we'll be hearing from today, and drawing on so many different best practice resources and guidelines from those external to the industry, we've developed something that can be used by everybody. So proseed helps us to understand where to begin and what's the right thing to do. A lot of the barriers to sustainable practice are knowing where to start and am I making the right decisions? And proseed helps to address those questions and address those barriers or challenges. So subjectively, it can be a really difficult topic. Sustainability can be really hard to navigate. Should or should we not eat meat? Should I or should I not fly? Is it better that I provide guests with a single-use plastic water bottle that's got a lower carbon footprint, or give them a metal keep bottle that they can use again and again if they want to, even though it has a higher carbon manufacture footprint? All these kind of questions that are really, really hard to answer and are really convoluted. You know, sustainability can feel like a minefield. But objectively, from an environmental perspective, it's actually really simple. We have to reduce our carbon emissions to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2030, and we must reach net zero by 2050. And we have to stop throwing things away. So from an objective perspective, what we need to do is clear. From a subjective perspective, it's knowing how to do that. So proseed looks down this objective track. It looks at the activities and behaviours and practices that will help us drive down our emissions and reduce our waste, which makes it much easier to look across the board, to look more broadly at an event and understand what the right or the best choices are. So the system works by helping us set objectives to reduce our emissions, to plan for these objectives, to monitor our progress, and to measure where measuring is applicable and reporting on this post-event. So it's objective setting, planning, monitoring and measuring and reporting. So I'm just going to jump straight into how does it work. I'm going to, got too many screens going on. So how does it work? Proseed is designed as an interactive website. So that means that you can go back to the website again and again and again. It's hosted online, so it doesn't sit as a PDF in your email somewhere or in the documents folder and you can never get to it. You can use it however you want, essentially. It's a free resource for the industry that you can access at any time. So I'm just going to jump over to the website. This is proseed.events. It is live. You can go and take a look at it. I would suggest maybe coming to the end of this kind of intro and then going and having an explore. But Proseed by Isla is an online interactive website. I won't show you just all the preamble and the blurb, but it talks about who our collaborators are and how to get started. So this is really the point that we're at of how to actually use Proseed. So I'm just going to jump straight to the guidance so I can give you a little example. So Proseed is set so that you can change what you see based on a recommended view. So as a production supplier, for example, you don't need to worry about most of the food and water impacts from an event, but you do need to think about what you're buying and your graphics and your signage. A venue as well doesn't necessarily need to think about audience travel or kind of the event energy, because that's due to what's being brought inside, but they've got certain other elements that they want to look at. And then we've got caterer, for example, who's looking more broadly at food and water impacts and how their staff is traveling and where they're sourcing their food from and so on. And then event organizers typically are going to be looking at everything. So if we just look at this from the perspective of being a caterer, you've kind of got this recommended view. Now you can explore the system and you can look at all the other areas as well, but we're just going to jump straight into food surplus and waste as an example. So you go through, you have a little look, there's some information here about why it's really important for us, so you can kind of increase your knowledge and awareness and also pull some of that information out if you want to use it to talk to clients. And then we've kind of got a few ideas about what we can do to improve our food waste practices to ensure that we're reducing our food waste and so on. And then the main part is where we come to this take action section. We jump on board to take action, and we have this opportunity to benchmark our progress. And this is what we talk about, being guided through a process and benchmarking your activity. So each section has a bit of guidance about how to use it or who might want to use this section and what you can use it for. And you can see that we've got a series of questions here that we can use to understand how we're doing operationally, that we might want to use to shape the design and delivery of our event. And we can select these areas. So let's just, for example, say we're doing these things. We have a look at how we're doing. we're doing 4 out of 10 at the moment. We can benchmark at a 4 out of 10 for our food waste and surplus practices. So we can say, all right, I want to get that up to a 5 or a 6. I want to improve. What are the things that I can do? I can do this and this, for example. How does that improve my score? Great. And we can use that then to shape the way that we deliver things operationally and shape the activities that we undertake on site. So if we just jump back here to how does it work, if we kind of use those 3 core catering benchmark activities, we can have a little look here and see, for example, how it might be applied. So, okay, sourcing, we scored 4 out of 9. You know, our benchmark was about average. So what can we do next time? We could go meat free. That's one of the benchmarking criteria. We could have set an objective to limit the food miles. That's another one of our benchmarking criteria. We might have looked at what we're doing and said, great, we're doing really well on service and packaging. Let's do exactly the same thing next time because we know it works. And then we can also look at food surplus and waste and see that we're scoring pretty badly on that area. So what could we do next time? Some simple things that we can do, like having food waste bins or pre-ordering our food or so on. So the idea around this is being able to understand where we might need to make some operational changes. For example, getting food waste bins if you're a venue. It might be that if you're a caterer, you now understand that tracking food waste should be part of your operational processes. And it also helps us to design and plan our events. So event planners can ask caterers to design menus using as much of a produce as possible, or making food waste bins part of a bin dot plan, these sorts of things. In this way, each part of the supply chain can look at the same criteria to understand how they can help the entire event perform better. So that's looking at operational improvements through to procurement improvements. So that helps us all get on the same page and work towards the same goals. So one of the things you might have seen just from that very quick looking at the benchmark criteria is that we've talked about policies and plans. You may have seen that there are criteria relating to whether or not a policy is in place or a plan is in place. So that is going to impact on your ability to perform well. But what we have understood is that you may well have environmental policies in place, which is great. That's brilliant. But for people that don't, we wanted to reduce the barrier to getting started, which means that we wanted to give you the resources you need to be able to go out and score well if you want to apply them. So we've actually created downloadable templates for people. Those are editable templates. They incorporate everything you need to be able to benchmark well. They are action-based templates. They're filled with specific actions you can take, from particular certifications you might want to look out for through to targets you might want to set yourself. And there's also project planning documents included within this as well, so that you can track and monitor and use these resources in whatever way suits your business. These are designed for any type of event business. The reality is that we should all have a policy in place. We should all have plans in place to support that policy. Invariably, our policies should push us towards net zero in a global 1.5 pathway by 2030. And so you can access these resources and use them to accelerate your performance if you choose to do that. These resources are a paid element. They're actually free to Isla members, but for anybody else, they can be downloaded on the website. They are actually discounted at the moment for part of our launch. And those of you here today will receive an additional discount code of 20%. That will come through in your the post-event email, and you can use that, and that will be on, I think it's 2 weeks that it's set for, so for an additional 20% off. So it's over to you. Proseed.events is live. It's free. You can go and explore it to your heart's content. You can come back to it again and again. The website is only going to improve with use. The more you use it and tell us what you want to see more of, what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work, the better we can respond to that by upgrading and updating and improving, whether that's kind of the information available, the functionality, how it works. This is a tool for the industry. You know, we've made this tool to support everybody in the industry, and it's been made with the support of our members. So it's really something that you can shape, you can engage with. You have a chance to share your learnings, share your knowledge, tell us what we can do better, what you've liked about it, and be part of that collaborative industry improvement. So on that, now we've understood what Proseed is, how it was created, why it was created, who can use it, how it works, all those sorts of things. I'm going to introduce some of our experts to take us through the 4 core areas of the events, and we are going to be hearing from Ed Gillespie. For anybody who knows or listens to the podcast John Richardson and the Futurenauts, you will recognise his dulcet tones. He is going to electrify us with information about electricity. So I will leave it with you, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And those of you who have already watched the video on the website will also know that that's my voice, which Anna memorably described as soothing but not dull. So hopefully I won't be sending you all to sleep over the next 4.5 minutes. I am coming to you from my water mill in Norfolk, which is actually quite relevant because what it represents is the energy transition. This was a water-powered mill. Then it was steam powered post-industrial revolution, moving on to electrically powered. And I make that point because what we're in the middle of right now is an energy transformation. Those of you who've worked in sustainability as long as I have, 20 years or more, will know that the transition towards a more renewable energy powered future is now well underway from some very small nascent seeds. And the events industry is going to be absolutely no exception in terms of driving that transition harder and faster. If you're a geek, you can look at the kind of live national energy grid mix, which shows that the component of renewable energy now is often bigger than the component of fossil fuels. When I checked a week or so ago, it was running at about 35% of our energy coming from renewables. And so your challenge, if you like, as energy managers for your events, and I know that my learned colleagues and fellow experts are going to talk about the embodied energy and carbon involved with travel and with things like food, but really we've got to make sure that every single venue we are using is being powered by renewable energy. So ask the question of your venue, do they purchase renewable energy from their supplier? It's an absolute no-brainer these days. Usually you can get it at a comparable price, sometimes even cheaper than a conventional fossil fuel tariff. And really, we are still lagging in the fact that what should be a fairly mindless decision is still not being made by many events. And also, we want to encourage our audience members and our event attendees to make these kind of switches themselves. So how can we incentivize them to domestically switch their own energy supply to renewables? Because that helps to cultivate that nascent demand. And so we've got to be on this road to decarbonisation, not least because just to sharpen all of our minds, as Anna said, you know, we're aiming on this sort of net zero, race to net zero trajectory, but we've got to do a 50% carbon cut by 2030. So that is going to be a hard task. And that's got to be absolute decoupling from our economic activity, not just relative. So we're going to do 50% in the next 8 years. And then we've got to do the other 50% by 2050, if not a lot earlier. So we should all be now getting our heads around every single opportunity, as well as switching to renewable energy, but also making those inroads into demand management. And the other thing I want to say is that at the minute we're still facing a lot of political dishonesty and I think actually responsible business leadership dishonesty around the tangible ways that those net zero targets can be delivered. It's great in one sense that we now have these high level aspirations, which are kind of demonstrating the destination to which we must get. But now we really need things like proseed, which are showing us the roadmaps and the route maps, which enable those big lofty targets to be delivered. Because in some sense, actually the time of a nice, smooth and managed transition is now behind us. It's going to get bumpy and it's probably also going to get painful. And the last thing I want to say is that the online world is not impactless. Whilst over the last 14 months or so, we've all become very polished and professional at conducting our events online, that also has a footprint. It may be smaller than that which a physical event might have, but 90% of the world's data has been collected in the last 2 years, and that was pre-pandemic data. So it's likely to get much, much larger. So we also have to make sure that we are carbon balancing or offsetting or trying to cut the carbon of our virtual events as well. So be part of this ginormous energy transformation. Do everything you can to cut your own energy consumption and buy renewable energy at every opportunity. And then we have a hope of getting to net zero by 2050, or if not a lot before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Good to hear from you. And like I said, Ed makes energy subject electrifying. For anybody listening today, if you are an Isla member, we do have a partnership with Big Clean Switch, who can help you switch your business energy. And we also, they're also offering Isla members 20% off to help your employees swap to green energy and give them up to £35. So if you are an Isla member, please do take advantage of that. That is one of the best things that we can do. It's so simple and it's an absolute no-brainer for transitioning to sustainable operations, essentially. So Ed, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. We're now going to be hearing from Julian, who is the Managing Director of the Sustainable Restaurant Association. Julian, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to, obviously we've spoken before, we've been on panels together, in fact, and I really just loved kind of your very practical sense of how to do things. You're very pragmatic, and I really, really enjoy that. So food is such a complex topic, and it's incredibly emotive. One way to get someone het up is if they're a meat eater, to tell them not to eat a sausage, and then watch someone go bright pink and have their head explode in a cartoon method. But no, I wanted to ask you to help us debunk some of the queries around sustainable eating. So really the first thing is plant-based better for the planet?
So in very simple response to that is, in CO2 terms, yes, plant-based is generally more better for the planet, in that if you are eating mostly plants, your impact and the carbon impact will be lower. However, it is more complex than just that, of course. So if you're eating highly processed meat products that are, using unsustainable soy that's coming, let's say, from the Amazon, then of course that's problematic, and is just as problematic, if not more, than eating meat. So I do think that there is a bit of nuance, there is a bit of wiggle room in there, and by no means is the only answer to having a sustainable future everybody going vegan. That doesn't need to be the answer. But do we all need to be more conscious of plant-based food versus meat products? Yes, we do.
Yeah. So kind of essentially what you're saying is that, swapping one type of processed food for another type of processed food isn't really a solution. If we're swapping from a meat-heavy diet to a plant-rich, nutritious diet is, in fact, better from an emissions perspective. But how do we kind of make plant-based eating, more impactful? Is it about local, seasonal, regional? Like, how do you make the right choice when creating a menu from that perspective?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. So I think absolutely be considering the local, seasonal aspects of your menu before all else. If you can be procuring your ingredients from local farms, you're not only doing your emissions a favor, but you're also supporting a local economy. You're also supporting British farmers. You're also supporting, putting your pound back into wanting to create a more regenerative British farming system. So I would say absolutely be looking for your local ingredients, the ways that you can shift to hero those seasonal ingredients as well. Be looking at how you can cut the unneeded animal products from your menu. So, make meat a celebrated thing if it's going to be served, or, cheese a celebrated thing that's going to be served, but invest in it. So get rid of the cheap meat is the thing that I generally say to people, especially in an events context. The filler stuff is the stuff that you don't need. And instead, use plants to fill that space, and provide those options.
Great, thank you. That's really useful. I think it's that idea of saying, you don't have to go without. It's just about doing things better, doing it in a slightly different way, and appreciating, quality over quantity, I guess, is a big thing. One of the things I wanted to ask you was around like how we can encourage behavioral change, because we speak to so many people at events. You know, we have, I think in 2018 we had something like 85 million people attend events, and I don't think that actually included international attendees, but I mean, that's a huge audience that we can talk to. So how can we use our events as positive platforms for behavioral change?
Brill, yes. So first of all, I would say that the best way to get people to change their food choices is to make it delicious. So, you know, nobody is going to switch to a plant-based diet or a you know, championing local food if the other option is tastier. That's always going to be a challenge. There's then some really simple behavioral nudges that there's more and more sort of evidence that's backing it up. So make it plentiful. So really do look at how you rebalance your menu. We were chatting previously about the idea that if you have 50% of the options are plant-based options, that the increase in people choosing those options raises massively. So if you really do not make it the one kind of outsider, the vegetarian option at the bottom of the menu. And speaking of, there's loads of evidence to say, don't label it just the vegetarian option. Make it sound delicious, make it sound, you know, describe it in the same kind of language and words. You hear a lot of use of kind of Middle Eastern tagine with aubergine and couscous or whatever it might be, in a way that makes it sound more tempting than calling it the vegetarian option. And third, move it up on the menu. Don't make it last. We had a really great story of working with Moro, a Spanish restaurant that's just on Exmouth Market, kind of an institution of a Spanish restaurant here in London. And they, you know, classic meat dishes on their menu. It's a beautiful restaurant sourcing amazing food. But they did a bit of an experiment where they moved their vegetarian option, which was like a mezza platter with a bunch of different things on it. And they moved that to be the first item listed on their mains. And they saw ordering of that item go up by 14%. Because as soon as one person does it, it was coming out of the kitchen, more people started going, oh, I want that. That looks lovely. I'd like to try that. And so you kind of build a bit of momentum behind it when you increase the importance of these things on your menu.
Yeah, that is so simple. That's just literally such a simple solution to sort of say, let's bump it up to the top. I really, really love that. I mean, we can all do that. We all design our event menus, you know, with meat at the top or veggie at the bottom more often than not. So what a simple solution just to kind of encourage behavioral change in that sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Final note is just not to let it be overwhelming. You know, we need 2 billion people to reduce the amount of meat that they're eating. We don't need 100 people to go vegan. We really need to not be overwhelmed into inaction and instead start looking at the ways that you can make some improvements along the way.
Yeah, progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, Julian. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Really appreciate your time today. Hope that was interesting for people.
Speak soon.
Thank you. So moving on to kind of the next pillar of the proceed system. So we've looked at energy, we've looked at catering. So now we're going to move on to talk about travel and transport. And we'd love to invite Bethan, if she's here, from Equilibrium, to turn on her camera. And yeah, she's here. Brilliant. So Bethan joins us from Equilibrium. She also, she's communications manager, lead, and Equilibrium are Isla's preferred partner for carbon balancing emissions from event travel and transport. So you will know that if you're a member and you've spoken to us, we have recommended Equilibrium to you in the past. They're absolutely fantastic. And Bethan's also part of the team that brought us Vision 2025, who have made huge strides in supporting the outdoor event industry with sustainability. And Bethan's going to be talking to us today on travel and transport and a little bit about Equilibrium. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for having me here. It's so good to be part of this really exciting launch of Proceed. So I thought I'd share a screen with you actually, so I can talk through a little bit more about the background of Vision 2025 and Equilibrium. So just checking that you can all see that. Starting with a little bit of background about Equilibrium and Vision 2025, and then sharing some of the findings that these organisations have made in terms of the environmental impact of events, and then looking at how this can be applicable to your event in terms of specifically tackling travel emissions to events, and perhaps how Equilibrium could be part of that picture. So starting with Vision 2025, so this is an organisation which is a steering group working with the outdoor events industry in terms of how to reduce environmental impacts. So we've been around since 2015 when we produced a report called The Show Must Go On. So The Show Must Go On looked probably for the first time at the environmental impacts of outdoor events in the UK, specifically music festivals, looking at energy, looking at waste, looking at travel and transport, and looking at food and drink, and really benchmarking those impacts. It also contained a roadmap about how events could reduce those impacts by 50% by 2025, which were the government guidelines at that time. So it was around the time of COP21. And since then, we have had over 120 festivals in the UK take the pledge to reduce their impacts and work together in terms of sharing information about what works and what doesn't work. And we've also updated the Show Must Go On report. Obviously, our government guidelines have changed. And so in 2020, we released the second edition of the Show Must Go On report. So turning specifically to travel, what the Show Must Go On showed is that up to 80% of the average UK festival's carbon footprint comes from travel. And that's just audience travel, because that's what we have most data on. So obviously when you start adding in artist travel and supplier travel, that figure is only going to rise. So obviously it provides this huge opportunity to start reducing your overall carbon footprint when you're looking at your event. So this is how Equilibrium was born. So this is a charity that was founded by festival directors who saw this opportunity and realized that they could tackle travel by working with audiences and their suppliers and their artists. So Equilibrium provides resources and tools and advice and inspiration to help events to measure and then reduce their emissions, their travel emissions. Then we go this extra step to support our members to invest in climate solutions to balance their unavoidable emissions. So the first step's always going to be measure and reduce, but then there is this option to do something really positive and put something back by investing in climate solutions like community-led renewable energy, like tree planting in the UK, ecosystem restoration, the protection of threatened rainforest. So now we're a community of over 60 events and festivals, as well as suppliers and artists and music companies. And it's been great to help Proseed to kind of put together this framework in terms of sharing some of the advice that's worked for these people. So since we set up, we have helped our members through our climate solutions to balance over 13 million travel miles, investing in community-led renewable projects, protecting threatened rainforests and planting trees in the UK and in northern Malawi. So the advice that we give to all of our members and what will be applicable to your events is that the first step is always to measure. So you can't tackle what you don't measure. So what you'll be looking at is your audience travel, your staff and crew, your suppliers and your traders, the artists and talent you have coming on site, and also your on-site vehicles. So any plant and hire vehicles that you have on site. So we provide tools to help you do this. We've got offline tools, online tools, an app, but you don't have to, there are millions of tools out there, and Isla provide a brilliant system for recording travel emissions. Julie's Bicycle also do, or create your own spreadsheet. So whatever works, but start measuring. So once you've started measuring and you know where your main impacts are and what you want to tackle, the next step is reducing your emissions. So making a plan, and this is something I think that Anna highlighted as well, that making a plan really, forward planning is really going to be key to your success in reducing emissions. So key factors for reductions, and this is what can be learned from the maybe the music festival industry, is that audience travel is key to tackle. So you might be using initiatives to increase car occupancy. You might be laying on dedicated coaches to your event. You might be situating your venue in a place which has great public transport links. You might be promoting lift sharing, or just making sustainable travel part of the experience. So this idea of slow travel being embedded into your event experience. So also looking at suppliers, using local suppliers. So an example from the music industry, Cambridge Folk Festival reduced their supplier travel impacts by 30% over 2 years by just prioritising using local suppliers. You might be working with suppliers who have committed to improving their logistics, so having less trucks coming on site. Working with your crew and forward planning so you have reduced production and infrastructure journeys, and using local talent, using local artists, or having a budget line in for sustainable travel for those artists. So knowing that you might need to budget a little bit more for them to take the train is really important. And then, of course, just communicating all of your initiatives and possibly incentivizing them as well, if that works for you. So all of these ideas and more are in Isla's Sustainable Travel Policy and Plan. If you want more inspiration from the music industry, from festival industry, then we've got a guide to sustainable travel for festivals and events, which has loads of case studies and inspiration. And the next step is to balance any unavoidable emissions. So when you've measured and when you've reduced as much as possible, we do offer the option to balance your emissions. So we've got 2 programs: planting through trees and ecosystem restoration, or community-led renewable energy projects. So we really undertake in-depth due diligence on all of the climate solutions partners that we work with, and we can make all of that information available to you. We report our carbon balancing in terms of tree planting in line with the Woodland Carbon Code, which is a UK government recommended scheme. And we help you share your achievements with your clients and audience through assets that we share with you. So it would be great to hear from you and hear about your journey to more sustainable travel. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bethan. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and to provide some really practical solutions and tips for how we can manage things. You guys have been involved in helping shape the framework and contributing to the way that we've created some of these resources. So a lot of what you've talked about, you'll be able to find in the benchmarking criteria on the Proceed website. Equilibrium supported us in building out the travel and transportation plan that you can download. And we'll come to any chat points in just a moment. But Bethan, thank you so much for joining us today. Really great to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So it was a very ambitious hour to think that we could cover everything that we wanted to in this time. So Eleanor Morris, who has pre-recorded a session on waste from RAP, I will play that video at the end of the session so that we actually can have time to invite our panelists on now. So you'll still be able to see everything that she has to say, which is actually really interesting, and definitely recommend sticking around. But for anybody that has to be off by 2 p.m, what we'll do instead is introduce our panelists now, so that we don't miss our live participants. So I'd love to welcome David Ball from Brand Fuel, an event agency who recently became ISO 20121 certified. Sam Chavanna from Goose Events, who's been very involved in the development of Proceed as one of our ISLA members. We've also worked together to produce some carbon reports. And then Selena Donald, who is founder and director of The Bulb, who has also been instrumental in helping shape Proceed. So Sam is having technical difficulties. We've got you on audio, Sam.
I'm glad you can hear me. You just can't see me.
Just can't see you. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. And unfortunately, I don't have any technical support right now. If anybody knows how to get Sam's video going again, that'd be great. But otherwise, we'll just make sure to come to you, Sam. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. You've all been involved in ISLA pretty much right from the beginning. Obviously, David, you're a founding member agency. So really just wanted to kind of get your ideas into understanding how Proceed fits into existing practices. So you've been on quite the sustainability journey. You recently achieved your ISO 20121 certification, and your team has been pretty heavily involved in the Proceed working group. So how do you see the system fitting into your existing practices, including your ISO certification? But also, how is it going to help you further track your performance and accelerate your sustainable deliveries further?
Great, thank you, Anna. And listen, it's great to be here. And just to say, look, I think the work you've done on Proceed is absolutely fantastic. I have to say to I think it's Julian on the food front, when she was talking about making food portions more plentiful, I thought she meant portion size rather than choice. But a bit of fun. So the key thing for us was we decided to go down the ISO route. Lots of people feel it's a bit onerous. We didn't find it onerous. It's been very helpful, and it's helped us as a business to set up very clear management systems. There is a difference really between isla, proseed, and ISO, and the clear difference is that isla and proseed are really focused on environment, whereas with the ISO we have to also take into account things like social and economic factors. But what's the really important thing here is about adoption, and I think the big win for proseed is that you've made the whole thing incredibly good looking and very easy to use. It's so much better for us to be able to bed this in our processes if the whole team finds it easy to use. And with both the website and things like the guidance, the best practices, and the downloadable templates, they're not just spreadsheets. These are really super practical tools, and that helps us to both train and develop staff. That staff development supported through proseed will feed fantastically well into our people pillar of sustainability. So it's going to support our ISO work and our ISO management systems really well. So I haven't been directly part of the working group, but I had a long conversation with our own sustainability ambassador, Emily Leach. And Emily is really, really excited about working with proseed going forwards, and knows that it will make a much bigger difference to our process and to our progress in becoming, really fantastic at delivering net zero events, which we've set ourselves as a target for next year. So it's been fantastic to be part of that sort of steering group.
Thanks, David. Emily's been really brilliant at engaging everything that we're doing, and it kind of leads on to the question around process. But Sam, I guess a question more for you is that because of the involvement as well of your team from Goose, just like Emily in the development of proseed as a resource and being part of the working group and reviewing the documentations, all those sorts of things, we know from having conversations with you that clients are asking about sustainable solutions more and more. So how do you see proseed helping you help your clients meet their sustainability objectives?
Well, can I just start by saying that our team have loved being part of the working group, and it's really enabled them to stretch their thinking. And the biggest thing they've learned is that most of the data they're already collecting as part of the event planning process. So it becomes less daunting and much more achievable to embed all of these choices and swaps that we now need to be considering. And what we're also finding from a client's perspective, some of them aren't actually asking us. We're leading that conversation to them, and we're saying we think we should be making these changes and making those positive suggestions already, rather than waiting to react and say, yes, we can respond to you because your sustainable ambitions are this. We're actually trying to lead that conversations ourselves. And it's sustainable event strategies. We can really take the lead on working with clients on things they didn't even know they needed to consider.
Yeah, well, that's really, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because that comes, it actually ties in very nicely to my kind of principal question for Selena, which is ultimately, having been involved kind of from the initial concept of proseed right back in May 2020, you've helped shape it. You've really been involved in the work that you do. You really understand the challenges that both event businesses but also brands are facing in sustainability. So leading on from Sam's point about taking the conversation to the clients, how do you think proseed as a resource and as a tool can drive businesses to achieve their sustainability objectives at both organisation and event level?
Yeah, I think definitely leading on from David and Sam, the first task really is understanding what your objectives are, and where your environmental impacts are, and how you can measure them and improve on progress. And that transition's really overwhelming at an organisation level. Just making that first step, the way you operate as a business, the muscle memory and behaviour change of your organisation. And what I loved about working on proseed was that we were creating that framework which made that transition really simple. Like David said, ready to pick up templates and guidelines, and you've already identified where the hotspots are and done all the work for people. So you're enabling people with this framework to just be able to pick it up and smoothly transition into being able to be more sustainable at an organization level. I think pretty much like what Sam said, you know, clients are now really expecting sustainability to be at the top of their agenda. It's in RFPs, it's moving to the top of how we deliver events and plan events and execute events. And so what Proseed does is really help guide decision making. So being able to look at the framework and the structure of different ways of looking at water conservation or waste management, but having that in front of you and being able to guide that decision making. So ultimately that's what sustainability is. It's responsible decision making. It's choosing one menu or choosing one waste management strategy or energy plan over another, which has a better environmental impact. So overall, it's that ready to use set of guidelines that people can pick up and really easily implement into their business.
Yeah. Thanks. And because Sam, you were saying that your team have really been involved with the working groups and realised that they're collecting so much data already. So I think that kind of leads on as well to David, you know, the ISO 20012-1 certification as well, is that actually there's a reporting part that needs to happen. And so how, I don't know who wants to take this question, but how are you kind of finding data capture and measurement and those sorts of things kind of in your general processes? Is it something that you're doing for every event or with every client?
I mean, I'll just very quickly, yeah, the reporting side of it is incredibly important. I think to Selina's point, this is a step before that. Proseed helps people make better decisions, so you get better reports. Sustainability is a really complex issue. It's super complicated. Therefore, we've got to get everybody on board. So I think better decision making, and I think Proseed also helps to really broaden the conversations. You know, it's not just about being owned by a project manager in the agency who's, you know, diligently got to report and capture every bit of data. He or she can be empowered to engage the whole supply chain as well as the venues, and it becomes a much broader conversation about making better decisions all the way through, rather than just reporting on what happened. So I think that reporting can lead to, you know, the really good scoring system. The scoring system is fantastic if you've got repeat jobs. Lots of agencies do the same job year on year. You can set targets. You can look to target the improvements you want to make. It's all good.
Yeah, I think you've also hit the nail on the head that actually one of the things that I probably didn't make clear enough in the introduction section about Proseed is that the fact that you know, we're calling it universal framework because it can be used by anybody, and the point is that it does take the pressure off of a single individual who's kind of got their saucepan and their wooden spoon on their soapbox, who's a sustainability enthusiast. It helps move it away from being an individual's responsibility to being that collaborative piece, because we're all looking at the same thing. How have you found, Sam, your suppliers engaging obviously over the last kind of 12 months and the work that we've done together, and kind of as things have been improving? And I know you were doing a lot with regards to kind of your sustainability agenda prior to becoming an ISLA member, but how have you found the kind of narrative change or the support of your suppliers? Has it differentiated since you've kind of started using some of the resources and tools?
Yeah, definitely. We actually attempted to start our sustainability journey back in 2015, but it just wasn't the desire to do that. So to actually then discover ISLA and the work we've done with you guys, it's opened up a different supply chain opportunity for us, because a lot of our existing suppliers are starting the journey as well, but a lot of them aren't and don't know where to start. And not just Proseed, but ISLA in general has made a bigger community for us that, well, as you know, we've reached out to you to say who are on your supply chain, who can help us out here. Some companies haven't survived COVID, so some of our suppliers are no longer around. So we are looking consciously for new suppliers in certain areas. So it's all good. It's this whole community is brilliant. We're a bit evangelist really about it, because it's just a no-brainer for us. It's giving us tools, it's giving us community, it's giving us knowledge, and all of that helps to make positive change.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that, Sam. It's why I invited you on here, because you're an evangelist. No, no, but it is great to know that we're so supported in what we're doing through our membership base. And I suppose what you've just talked about in terms of the fact that actually sustainability for the events industry at the moment is just making sure that your business survives day to day. So in many ways, some of the sustainability narrative is around survival. But I suppose, Selena, you've worked with brands and you've kind of been engaged in big pitch work for really exciting projects. But how are you seeing the narrative change for brands and event owners? Is it higher up on the agenda? Is it less high on the agenda? Where do you see it sitting, environmental sustainability?
Really high up on the agenda now. I mean, I've been working in this area since 2015. And in the last 2 years, I've seen such a big jump in just inquiries coming through to the board, but also looking at RFPs, looking at the weighting sustainability is given, looking at the weighting that they do, that's given to the response, but also not just having that sort of standard response, actually being able to show that you understand the metrics, you understand carbon footprinting, you understand the impacts of what you're doing. And now I think clients are expecting agencies to have that expertise in-house. You know, they also need it. You know, our clients depend on us to produce amazing events for them. They don't exactly know what a sustainable, amazing event looks like. And it's up for us to have that expertise as well. So I think it's about evolving our skill sets in our agencies. It's about having, you know, what was great to hear you say, Sam, was like that you've got a whole team that are all really into sustainability. Whereas I often find when I go into agencies and brands, there's one or two people, there's maybe one really a switched on leader, but everyone else I'm sort of kind of dragging. And I've really seen a difference in that in the last, I'd say even the last 6 months to a year, as we've seen generally like media and consumers becoming more aware of what they're eating, who they're buying from, what we're reading. And so I think all of it going hand in hand is making it a really exciting space for us to be in. And I think the creative challenge is brilliant. You know, innovation isn't quite at the same level as demand at the moment. You know, we're still waiting for a lot of things to be evolved, you know, in vehicles and transport, in the way, and even in energy and places, areas like that, the materials we use. But as we're coming out with more ideas and the opportunity to be more creative in this area, it's really exciting. I can't wait to see what events we come up with that don't have the awful impact that we did have 3 years ago.
Yeah, thank you. I think what you talked there about upskilling the industry, I actually was on a panel recently with a tech company that was sort of, you know, taking the opportunities or the positives that we've seen from COVID, is that actually the entire industry has been upskilled in virtual and hybrid and digital events virtually overnight, because we've had to pivot. And so it's that idea of actually Proseed enabling a kind of rapid upskilling and education across the industry in the sustainability narrative. So that upskill is really important. Brilliant. Thank you so much for being part of the panel today. Really appreciate hearing from you all and for your ongoing engagement with Isla and support for everything that we're doing. I'm conscious that we're coming to the end of the session, and I don't think in my housekeeping notes I opened up the opportunity for any Q&A. So I don't know if we're going to get any Q&A through. So what I'm going to do is say thank you so much to our panelists. I'm actually going to share my screen and share the pre-recorded video from Eleanor Morris that looks at our waste pillar, and then that should bring us nicely up to just past 2 o'clock, at which point this session will end. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely brilliant to be joined by so many of you. We were only anticipating about 150, so to have seen 200 or so of you join has been absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much. I will share the video to play us out. Let's make sure that I've got it going. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining today.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to joining you today. My name's Eleanor Morris. I work for WRAP, which is a UK-based sustainability charity. Our vision is to have a world where resources are used sustainably, and we focus on textiles, plastics and food. So I'm going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour today about some aspects that you might want to consider to do with waste prevention and recycling. So without further ado, back in 2018, DEFRA produced the Resources and Waste Strategy, and this follows the principles and focus areas that DEFRA want to take action on. So it all hinges on a circular economy. So that's where you recycle and recover materials, you reduce consumption and use of materials, and then you manage those materials as effectively as you can with waste management. Now, obviously, that is a much more complicated area. You can see some further details in the second wheel of activity, but everything that I'm going to be talking about really sits within the circular economy. We're particularly focusing on food and food waste, because that really helps with delivering those net zero targets that we're all focusing on at the moment. So the principles that DEFRA focus on are around the waste hierarchy. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but just to reiterate, this is about prevention. That's the most cost-effective thing to action that we can take. Then reuse, recycling and recovery. So with food, for example, that is where it gets sent to anaerobic digestion. And then, of course, disposal and making sure that we're disposing of any waste safely and appropriately. I work on a campaign called Guardians of Grub, which focuses on the UK hospitality and food service sector. And within the UK, we throw over 1 million tonnes of food away every single year. The most staggering part of that is that 75% of the food that ends up in the bin could have been eaten. And that's an enormous impact in terms of food contributing to climate change, because we know that wasting food feeds climate change and it affects your profits. So if we can focus in on preventing that edible food from being thrown away, that's going to make a big difference. So that's really where the campaign focuses. There's also UK-wide action in this area. So we've got the UK Food Waste Reduction Roadmap, which interprets the global UN Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, which is all about reducing food loss and waste. So the principles are setting a target to reduce food waste, measuring against that, and then acting against that. So we've got the roadmap that has a target of 50% reduction by 2030. And then we also have a voluntary agreement called the Quartile Commitment 2025, which looks at waste, but it also looks at greenhouse gas emissions and water as well within the production of UK food and drink. We've got some fantastic tools, all completely free for you to use. We've got 4 clicks of a mouse, and you can find out what Target Measure Act means for you, how much it could save you every year if you set a target. And we've also got all the tools you need to get cracking with tracking, which means that you can identify where food waste is happening on your site, but you can also pinpoint and work with the teams to understand where that's coming from. This is all about understanding where food is being wasted, and where you make savings, that makes a difference to your bottom line and your gross profit margins. Got a great example where Abby from Olympia London used the Guardians of Grub materials with the events organisers, but also with concessions within her venue, and really started to see some fantastic changes and savings that were being made. And she was incredibly passionate to make this work. And it's really simple actions like chopping lemons in drinks into more slices per lemon, simple things like that. But it's all about teamwork. It's about working together and winning hearts and minds with staff. So we've got some courses that you can use to build skills, knowledge within the teams. And what we've seen is it really engages people. They want to take action. No one feels good about throwing food in the bin. So this is a 15-minute simple course, freely available on our website, to help you understand how you can target Measure Act right now and take action. We've also got a more in-depth behaviour change programme where we invite, again, it's free, it's about skills development, it's about measuring your food waste, also developing your skills, and UK Hospitality and the Sustainable Restaurant have given their support to that as well. We've got places available from July onwards, so email guardiansofgrub@rac.org.uk, and we'd love you to be part of the movement. You can take a pledge on our website to become a Guardian of Grub. We've got fantastic freely available operational tools and courses to help you get started, as well as a campaign pack that's full of social media, copy, imagery and so on. So help us protect profits and the planet together today. I want to also touch on compostable packaging. I know this is a really big area for the sector. So we've got some guidance that helps you consider what options you can take for making decisions around compostable packaging. The contents, as you can see here, what is it? What does the landscape look like today? Where can you use compostable plastics? How you might want to share your communications. There's a really helpful interactive decision-making guide, as well as glossary, so that you can get that insight. Bioplastics can be quite a confusing area, so this guide aims to clarify some of those points. We encourage people to use to avoid the term biodegradable for plastic materials. It can be really confusing, but there's lots more detail in that guide, so I'd really encourage you to use that. There's some statements that you might want to use, and I've mentioned this decision-making tree as well, which can be super helpful. And just at the moment as well, there's a consultation that's live on the consistency in household and business recycling. So again, just wanted to flag this. You might want to get your voice heard, and we'd encourage you to do that. There have been a series of consultations, including extending producer responsibilities and deposit return schemes. This is about increasing the quality and amount of recycling in England. So understanding what are the issues, how can we improve the tonnage and quality, and what support is required. So the consultation closing date is the 4th of July. So we would really encourage you to have your say, because we understand that this is going to affect different businesses in different ways. So we want to make sure that DEFRA have got everything, all the information that they need to take that forward. So collaborative procurement might be one option that people favour. Zoning, where you have a particular borough where you're collecting all the waste from businesses and households within one waste collection zone, combining those collections or having commercial bring sites. There's lots of options, and it's about getting your perspective on that. So please do search on DEFRA's website to look at that consultation. So I just wanted to thank you very much for your time today. We'd love you to get involved with Guardians of Grub. Do check out the resources on the WRAP website, and we look forward to supporting you on your journey to net zero. Thanks very much.
Thank you to anybody that's made it to the end. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully you love Proceed. Feedback to us. If you want to get in touch, my email is anna@weareisla.co.uk, but I am taking a very much needed break next week. Or you can email hello@weareisla.co.uk if you're interested in finding about membership. And obviously you can reach us through proceed.events through the contact page. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing how it all goes and how you enjoy using it. Thank you very much.